Powered by Red Media in partnership with TSN, it is season 6 of the Rain Dregs Hockey Podcast, presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. Have you tried the Canadian Club Classic 18-year-old high proof? It's got the aromas of caramel, toffee, spicy vanilla, rich oak, and a butterscotch super smooth finish. Invite your senses to an elevated Canadian whiskey experience with Canadian Club. And for those of you on the YouTube channel, you can see Ray fitting comfortably in his palatial suite. Where are you on this fine Thursday morning?
Actually, Dregs, I do have a suite, which is kind of nice. Which is kind of nice. I'm in Chicago, which a half an hour ago was pretty clear, nice, and right now it's snowing like crazy.
Ooh.
And yeah, that came out of left field. And yeah, I'm Chicago. I love the city. I love being down here.
Great city.
Lots to do, but today will be, by looking out that window, today will be a hotel day, prep day, no walking outside day.
Nah, that first snowfall, I'm assuming it's the first in Chicago. I could be wrong.
Yeah, nothing
always hurts the feelings. Like, we got lots of pictures this week from family out west, right? It's Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and it ranges from a couple of inches of snow to damn near a foot. And you're like, not ready for that yet.
Yeah. Put it this way. We get about 3 snowfalls a year in Vancouver, and it's beautiful for 24 hours. And then it's a frickin' mess. And we're like, how quick until this stuff is out of here? Because we're just not equipped for it, man. They were just not equipped for it. I mean, I think we got a snow shovel, or I think we wait for it to melt. I'm not sure. But I like the snow. I like to look at it. I don't want to be in it.
I have a love-hate relationship with snow because I've got this. We've talked about this on the pod. I've got this super-duper snowblower, right?
Yeah,
self-propelled. Right. I just kind of steer this thing around. So I love that aspect of it. But then the guilt trip hits, right? Because if there's enough snow that has fallen to require the snowblower, then chances are the 15 neighbors all around you are in dire need. And most of them are elderly. And so here I go. But
here's the thing, Dregs, I gotta help for you though this year. Okay. I got a cheat code. He's about what, 23? He lives with you. He's really a strong kid.
Right.
Mason Dreger, get your ass behind the snowblower.
Happened once last year and he broke it. So I was like, you're not doing that anymore. You're not
touching
it. Should. Buzz off.
Oh, you see, buzz off. Beat it, kid.
Which he did it by design. It was a minor fix, but it took me an hour and a half to figure it out. I think he actually loosened the nut on whatever the mechanism was. And
good thinking by him. Good thinking by him.
All right, there's a lot going on this week. As you know, you're on top of it. So am I. So let's get to it in headlines, brought to you by Tim Hortons. Second annual holiday smile cookie is here until November 24th, so not a lot of time left. 100% of the proceeds donated to local charities and community groups, including Tim Hortons Foundation camps. Now, last year, Tim's guests helped raise almost $10 million, $9.8 million. So support your community this holiday season with a purchase of a delicious white chocolate sugar cookie. They've got the red and green sprinkles. And, of course, the hand-decorated smiley face. I always appreciate that because I order the smile cookie, Ray, and I'm like, it has to be hand-decorated because otherwise they'd all be uniform. And they wouldn't be crooked in certain situations. So I appreciate the artistry of it all.
Can I tell you something I like about a smiley face that I see maybe 15 times a year? When the New York Rangers play, right? I'm standing between the benches. At the end of warm-up, Mika Zibanejad comes over and grabs a water bottle. And he leans into the bench. And he makes a smiley face with the water bottle on the ground. I don't know why it cracks me up. He does it every game, but he's with the water. He makes the 2 eyes and the smiley nose or the smiley face. And I'm like, that puts him in a good mood to play. I just love it. I've never even thought of that. I was like, I like it. So every game, if you see Zibanejad leaning over the bench, that's what he's doing.
So I used to do that when we were on road trips with the buddies, and you had to stop halfway because you We've all done the smiley face, Ray. Come on. The eyes, the nose, the smile. We've all done it.
Gee, I don't know what you mean. I get no idea.
All
the
right.
thing is, you did it last week, and that's you're a little old for that.
That's why I'm excited about this first snowfall. Okay, let's look back to some of the games last night. It wasn't controversial for me, but I'm looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs Vegas Golden Knights game, and Zach Whitecloud absolutely steamrolls Matthew Knies of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So social media reaction, I don't know why we normally respond to this, but it ranges, right? From Carlo Goliacovo, who's a card-carrying Toronto Maple Leafs fan,
right?
Tim Peel, a former official, who, he too came out swinging. But I value his opinion, given his past career. So whether you agree with his commentary or not doesn't really matter. The man has some experience in that regard. Bruce Boudreau on the Whitecloud hit said that he felt that it was a major because Whitecloud left his feet. Now, just again, for policy purpose here, it was a major that was called on the ice. So because of that, they are allowed to take it to review, which they did. That involves the situation room. But most importantly for me, Ray, it also involves the officials. It involves the referees. And they get another look, which is the reason why they feel comfortable in rescinding it. So before we dive even deeper than that, first of all, you probably watched it a half a dozen times.
Yeah.
What was your initial thought? Did you think it was a major?
Initially, I went, whoa, like everybody else, like you're watching it because it was so big, right? Like the hit was, and it's a rare hit in the middle of the ice. Yeah. I want to start, though, with the policy thing, Dregs, because you went by it, you talked about it, but it's super important to know that it's not the situation room making the decision by themselves. Correct. The officials are involved in it, too. And I think that's critical that they be involved because the situation room guys are drinking coffee and they're sitting in a room in Chicago or in Toronto, and these guys got to go out and announce the decision. So it's imperative that their view is taken with great weight in this call. So right away, I know before I've read anything that people are going to connect Ryan Reeves' hit and 5-game suspension to this hit. And I know what's going to happen. My first thought becomes, well, if you say Darnell Nurse should have his head up, then Matthew Knies should have his head up.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's, if it's for one, it's for the other. But that, with all these opinions, that seems to go away. That's what I read last night. It had nothing to do with keep your head up.
Yeah.
And the fact is, you should keep your head up. Everybody in the NHL knows, well, actually, from the time you start hitting, everybody knows you should keep your head up. Sometimes you don't see the traffic, even if it's in front of you. I did this 1,258 times. I got a pretty decent idea. Sometimes you run dead smack into somebody, and you're like, where the hell did he come from? Mike Greer hit me in Edmonton one time. Mike Greer, when he played, was 230 pounds.
Yeah.
You tell me how I didn't see him. I didn't see him. He went over me like a speed bump to the point that guys were, as I went back to the bench, the Edmonton bench said, are you okay? Like, he hit me that hard. I had no idea where he came from. It was like he got dropped out of the sky. I thought it was a 5-minute major because it was a violent hit. But I don't know that it's anything or could possibly be anything more than that. Reeves was a suspension because the only thing he hit was his head. It was the only thing that he hit. Whitecloud went right through the middle of his body, and eventually, if you go through the middle of his body, you're going to get to the head. Yeah. And so here's the problem. It's not a 2-minute penalty because why could it be? He had the puck. Right. But I thought it was a 5-minute penalty. And then I'm like, I don't even know the rules anymore. Like, how could it be a 5 but not a 2? just because he hit him hard.
Yeah.
Well, you're allowed to hit guys hard.
Right.
The hit didn't travel anywhere, Whitecloud. He didn't travel anywhere. Knies was doing all the traveling. He stepped up on him and he laid his shoulder into the hit. I think his right foot is on the ice when he makes the hit and his left foot elevates. And if you think of it, it's almost like a teeter-totter. If you put more weight forward, the back of the teeter-totter comes off the ground. That's how I felt the hit was.
And driving up in that sense, whether it's intentional or not. Yeah.
When you make a hit, anytime you push yourself forward, you're going to move, you're going to elevate.
Yeah.
So I thought it was at the very most, it should be a 5-minute penalty, no suspension. But here's the thing. The rule does not state that.
Right.
The old international hockey rule, which was any contact to the head is a major in a game misconduct. I actually kind of like the rule. And then you see there's a couple of hits that are kind of dicey, but because there is eventual head contact, the player gets kicked out of the game. So the NHL doesn't want to go that far. Here's the other part of this, Dregs, I'll say, is everybody thinks it's a major penalty until it's against their team.
True.
And then nobody wants. Then no, there's 18 other reasons. So I'm waffling on this. I still, as I'm talking about it, I don't feel definitive one way or the other. So I would probably lean to no penalty because the fact that I still can't make up my mind, even though I've watched it 7 or 8 times.
And the line is so thin, right? And look, here's where you run into the unintended circumstance, which we always hear the hockey operations guys talk about, right? And so because the referees in the situation room are allowed to look at the replays and have the option to rescind, okay, they do that. That's what happened last night. But they've already called the penalties on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Well, they can't rescind those. So now, inexplicably, well, no, it's easy to explain. They called the penalties on the ice. They could only rescind the major. So Toronto comes out of that whole sequence shorthanded. And I think that angered them as much as anything, to be fair.
Right. And I'm thinking about, could there be a way to unwind the watch? And there isn't. I mean, Benoit jumps on Whitecloud and, and gives him a couple of these and a couple of those, and you got to give him a penalty, right? And it's an unfair circumstance. It really is. And I guess way back 100 years ago, as much as people agree or disagree with Gary Bettman, he said when we went to video review,
yes, he did,
be careful, because once it starts, it's tough to unwind it or put the genie back in the bottle, whatever Gary's term was. And all these years later, he's been proven correct, because that 25-foot offside play with Matt Duchene has led to a quagmire at the blue line.
It has.
It should have never come to that. But, we got to get it all right. Well, we don't get it all right. I think the review of the major penalty is absolutely a good thing. But last night was an unintended circumstance, as you called it.
Yeah. All right. Other news this week. Jim Montgomery let go on Tuesday by the Boston Bruins. Brad Marchand, the captain of the Bruins, as you would expect, blames himself. He blames the players for putting Monty in this situation. So what does it say, Ray, about management and ownership when you fire a coach, as our colleague, Andrew Raycroft, pointed out, who amassed a record with the Bruins of 120, 41, and 23. 120, 41, 23. There was nothing else, right? Sweeney's trying to make trades. I mean, is it as simple as that? The coach is always the easiest knee-jerk solution?
It can't be really much of anything else. So let's go back to 2 years ago. Patrice Bergeron's gone. David Krejci's gone. Most of us, well, me, I'll say me. I don't know what anybody else says. Who cares? This is my opinion. I thought they were going to lose 20 to 25 points from their record-setting year. I thought they would, if they got to 100 points, man, I was like, that's going to be really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
They did it again. This is the fallout of when teams get older. In Boston, they've been spoiled here for 20 years with just a remarkable set of leaders and players and goaltenders. And they have built a culture in Boston over this 2 decades that has just been enviable. Yeah. Eventually, guys get old and guys get retired. And then you get to the point where you have to replace players. The coach can coach the 20 players in front of him. I always have said that the reason coaches walk back and forth behind the bench is they're looking for new players. They're looking for new guys, but they still got the same 18 sitting there. Right. So in the offseason, the Bruins spent $150 million, Dregs, on Jeremy Swayman, Nikita Zadorov, and Elias Lindholm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The chronological order of trading Ullmark, signing Swayman was backwards.
Yeah.
I know they wanted to trade Ullmark because you probably get the best return, but you better be damn sure that you've got Swayman signed. Now, Swayman misses camp, and it throws everything into a little bit of a blender, right? Everybody knows your top goaltender sitting at home, and there's really only there's 3 choices. He's going to sit out, you're going to trade him, or he's going to get signed. And none of it is good. None of it is good. Because when he comes back, the ground is shaky underneath him till he gets set. The Bruins need skill. They need skill in the middle of the ice. They signed a replica of Charlie Coyle in Elias Lindholm. They already got Charlie Coyle. Now they signed Elias Lindholm. Now you got 2 50-point centermen that are going to chew up all of your ice time, paying a large sum of money. Lindholm had a terrific fit in Vancouver once he got healthy as the 3rd center. That's what he is. That's what he is, and that's what Charlie Coyle is. And now they're asking both of them to play number 1 and number 2. When you elevate people to places they can't be, it just doesn't work. Now you got Nikita Zadorov, who had 2.5 brilliant months. He was a cult figure in Vancouver. Was awesome. But he got 6 years in Boston. Mm-hmm. Vancouver wasn't going to go that far. So now you got a $5 million 3rd pair defenseman. So in my mind, you can, and here's the thing, I'm criticizing the management, Don Sweeney and Cam Neely and the group that puts it together, but you can't go invent players. No. They went and said, who are the best players we can get with the money we have? And that's what they came up with. So you could say they shouldn't have signed those 2 players, but then who are they going to sign? They got to try and get better. Yeah. They've got to try. They felt they were a little bit of toughness away from beating Florida. Mm-hmm. But to assume that is that everybody else was going to be the same as last year. And that's not the case. That's not the case. Because guys have career years and then they don't match them again. In this, so I guess what I'm saying is Montgomery had a very imperfect hand. Charlie McAvoy's had a brutal start to the season. He's your number 1 defenseman. Brad Marchand had body repairs all over the place all summer. How can he possibly be the same at 36 years old? At the very best, he's going to take a couple of months to get back to last year. He's not going to improve, right? And so he's fighting away and doing whatever the hell he can, but he's not healthy. Yeah. And so 8-9-3 is their record. They must feel that something else was so completely off that they had to make a coaching change. Now, moving Joe Sacco 3 feet down the bench, I don't know if that's fair to Joe or what Joe's going to be able to do. But when you're the interim tag, they clearly don't have the next guy there, or they don't have the okay from ownership to go hire another coach immediately. Yeah. But when you look at that record, it feels really unfair.
You know what was interesting, too, in Don Sweeney's address to the media? He acknowledged that Montgomery turned down gestures of contract extension, which is interesting to me, right?
Doesn't it tell you, Dregs, we never know the full story, right? Like, you just never know. Like, what if What if at the time Jim was like, like that offer's not right, and then after he turned it down, the team went sideways.
Yeah.
Right. Like it becomes a timing thing, and it's there's more to a story always than what you see.
Yeah, and Jim Montgomery is a good coach. We know this, and he is going to get another job, whether it's in season or he wants to just push the brakes and see what's available to him on the open market in the off season. I mean, we're going to find out. Let's shift gears to another coaching situation, and actually, there's a couple of teams that we're going to keep an eye on. And I don't know. I watched a panel last night in the Leaf game where I think it was Luke Gazdic identified Andrew Burnett as being on his hot seat. And I mean, it's pretty obvious given the start of the Nashville Predator. Fair or unfair, that's what certain people do, right? You look at the standings. Okay, they're below expectation. Yeah, the coach is on the hot seat. So I want to ask you, because it was curious, and it's happened before, but I don't remember the last time, where a team got a penalty right off puck drop for icing an illegal lineup, right?
Sure.
So the players that they listed in the starting lineup aren't not all on the ice. So there's a penalty on the play. Like, who's that on? Is that on one of the coaches? Is it on the head coach? Is it on the players? Is it like it's not even like a too many men. Is it a collective gaffe? What is it?
Well, I guess, technically speaking, the head coach has got to chew it. I'm not sure who fills out their lineup card. We had Rick Bowness on one time, and I asked him about a game I was playing in where him and Alain Vigneault were the coaches in Ottawa. Like, just think of that. Alain Vigneault and Rick Bowness were on the same coaching staff. And they were in Ottawa. We were playing them on the island. They started the wrong lineup. Right. Bowness told us he usually filled it out, but that night Vigneault filled it out for whatever reason. And somebody's name got written on there wrong. But Bowness said, as the head coach, I had to chew it. Because, right, like, you got to chew it. So Stamkos started last night in Seattle instead of Forsberg. 91 versus 9. Right?
Yeah.
Andrew Burnett said in the game it was a clerical error. Somebody didn't dot an I and cross a T. Right? Like, it's the goofiest thing, but it can't happen. It can't happen. Now, so Gazdic's got, now I'm gonna be a half defender of my buddy here. He's got Brunette on the hot seat.
I think he did, right? Do I have that right? That was in the panel.
I don't know. I didn't hear it, but
it's their version of the quiz. I think they borrowed that from somebody else.
So okay, you're something else. So, anyways, last year he's a Coach of the Year finalist. They spend $100 and whatever million on 3 free agents that have not worked this year. It hasn't worked. So that's the coach's problem. I guess you can say you got to get them to play together. They still don't have any centermen. Yeah. They still don't have any. Ryan O'Reilly's 32 years old, and I watched him the other night, and the guy does everything right on the ice. Like, literally does everything right, but he's not getting faster.
No.
And so I don't – if Andrew Brunette's on the hot seat, that's Barry Trotz pissed off at himself for putting the pieces together that don't quite fit. So I'm going to defend Brunette in that. There's other guys that are on the hot seat. I think we're going to get to one in a second that probably make a little more sense. But as far as the lineup, I don't know who's at the end of that, but I can only imagine standing behind the bench in a suit when they come over with the lineup card and you're like, oh, what did we do?
Yeah.
Because the other team has that right away. Like when Ottawa started the wrong lineup all those years ago, we could hear behind the bench, nobody say anything. They've got the wrong guys out there. That was Al Arbert. And so, because they didn't want some loudmouth like me yelling, they got the wrong guys out there.
Yeah, of course.
And then they made a change. So nobody said anything. And we were waiting for the whistle because that's the first time you can challenge the lineup. And sure enough, they got the wrong lineup out there. So,
well, look, there's the primary reason why we're focusing here on coaching is, not just because there's been struggles in Nashville and you're right in Detroit and obviously in Boston. It's because now there is a guy available out there in Jim Montgomery. And historically, when coaches are put on hot seats and are still employed, I always say the same thing. Yeah, we in the media can talk about Andrew Burnett. We can talk about Lalonde in Detroit, all of that. But the question for me is always the same. Who is better? If
right.
you're firing your coach, like, is Boston convinced Joe Sacco is an upgrade on what they had in Montgomery? Of course not. Of course not. It's the change for the sake of change. But to Detroit, Ray, I do get this feeling that they're on an important homestand right now. Like, Detroit is in that glut of teams in the East that needs to do something, like, quick. Like, they've got to get on a hot streak. Otherwise, the playoffs it's not going to happen. So does it come at the expense of Lalonde? I know Yzerman is kicking tires. He's like so many managers trying to find an upgrade, which isn't easy to do at this point of the season. So do you sense something needs to happen given what you're seeing out of the Red Wings?
Yes, and this is why, though. So, like, when the Bruins they lost a couple of games ago at home, not the clunker that they had against Columbus, but a few games ago. And they had a pretty soft spot in the schedule. And it kind of felt like if something was going to happen, it was going to happen in that soft spot.
Yeah.
And like it just starts to present itself given the team struggles and the schedule. And you go, yeah, that could be it. Detroit's sitting down there. They're tied with Montreal.
Yeah.
And that feels like a pretty dangerous time there. It's been, Lalonde is there. I think he's in his third year now. And, there's a time when you go, oh yeah, they're a team on the up, they're starting to come and it feels like they're getting better. And then they're in this spot again.
Yeah.
But in Detroit, it feels coaching change. In Ottawa, it feels player change. They just hired Travis Green. It's not a coach. It feels like, why are they there again? Right? Like, why? And
has to feel that way. Yeah.
And then the dangerous spot, well, in Pittsburgh is another place. Like, they've started to sell off some players. But how long is Mike Sullivan going to go, hey, wait a minute here. I'm sitting around here coaching a team that we didn't think we were going to have. And maybe there's a point where him and Dubas say, is this the right place? Like you can go through teams, Dregs. We're talking specifically in Detroit, but teams would love to make moves. You can't just say it all the time. You can't invent players. You can't just call around and say, hey, could you lend me a number 2 center? Or could you lend me another D? And so Detroit has been a disappointing team for sure. And it feels like patience is starting to wear a little thin. Sure. And there is the danger for every team that says we should rebuild. Great, rebuild. It's 2 or 3 years to get rid of everybody because you can't generally trade those players until they're in the last year of their contract.
Sure. Yeah.
So you got to wait 2 or 3 years while you offload. In the meantime, you're accumulating draft picks, which are often 1 and 2 years out, which then means 3 or 4 years past there before they're impact players. Now you're 6 and 7 years before you even have a chance. Like, what do you think is going to happen in Chicago? They're getting their teeth kicked in again. And great, they're accumulating draft picks. Some of them are in 2027. It's 2024. That's 3 drafts from now. That's 7 years before those players are impact guys. Like, it's a long, hard road.
Well, and look, you remind me of the conversation I had with Mark Chipman, where he acknowledged last year publicly, almost a year ago, in fact, that before they decided to extend Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck, they had a long conversation, or he did a fair amount of research and talked to people that he trusts in Detroit because the Red Wings had been in this extended rebuild, and quickly acknowledged that a small market, a team like the Winnipeg Jets can't afford to do that. You can't go 7 to 10 years of non-playoff hockey. I mean, that can't happen. So they dug in and they took a different path. So it's a pressure-packed scenario for a few teams, and Detroit and Chicago are definitely right there.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct. Jim Montgomery popping up on the market makes teams look at their coaches a lot differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Some want to look at St. Louis, and I don't think that's fair to Bannister. And we'll get on to Vancouver because they're dinged up in St. Louis, right? And I think for the most part, Drew has done a nice job there. He's come up through the American League. Let's see what happens throughout the course of the year.
Hang on. He just signed an extension. The owners in St. Louis, they're not a huge deep pockets group. No. They're not going to say, "Oh, you know what? Let's pay another head coach."
I'm not buying it either.
Yeah. No, I don't at all. And by the way, Jim Montgomery's not going to be coaching for $26 an hour, right? Like
no, probably not.
It's a big check if Jim's going in, because he's still getting paid in Boston till the end of the year.
So the Canadian markets, Ray, as we know, we feed the media. We feed on drama, right? So JT Miller takes the indefinite leave of absence this week. I guess what I'm reminded of as I sorted through this story was we forget that these men are human beings, right? Mm-hmm. So, the fact that his wife, Natalie, felt compelled to delete her socials to avoid an expected crush of comments is a fairly sad indictment of the world that we live in. But it is, right? It's a reminder that, okay, this guy's not feeling great physically. He knows he's not playing well. That's taking a mental toll. The team isn't playing well. That's taking a mental toll. The Canucks are heading out east. If there's a time in the schedule where you feel physically, mentally, you need to recharge, then this is the right time. But beyond that, I'm not trying to diminish that this is a big story. Of course it is. This guy, as you know, I mean, he's the driver of this bus. when that team is rolling, normally it's because JT Miller is dragging them into the fight game in and game out. So maybe I'm being soft in this, but it feels like this is a challenge now to the rest of the team to respond, especially on this road trip, and let JT Miller do whatever he needs to do to get himself healthy again.
Well, when I see personal leave, that my next thought is, it's none of my business.
Yeah, I'm with
none
you.
of it. It's not. I mean, like, whatever it is, I hope he's okay. I hope his family's okay. Whatever is impacting him to the point that he can't play, I hope that it's okay. But I go to the rink that morning, and of course, all the media, it's like, the Rangers were in town. So there's quite a few people around, and everybody's saying, "What do you know? What do you know? What do you know?" Know nothing. I don't know anything, and I don't. Yeah. I'll say I don't care. I do care, but I don't care because it's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Like, I think people innately are curious and they want to know. I also think, because I was reading around a little bit, and people are like, "Oh yeah, well, too bad if he wants privacy. He's got a public job and he's making lots of money." And bullshit. It's nobody's business. Whatever's going on will come out or won't come out, and it's JT Miller's business. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, the Canucks had to play that day against the Rangers. They played a hell of a game and lost 4-3. It was really one of the most entertaining games I've done this year. It was an awesome game.
Yeah.
And now they go on the road trip, and you're not going to have Miller there. You don't have Besser. You don't have Demko. You're kind of hanging on by a shoestring. And all you can do is worry about who's there and who's not.
Yeah.
You can't worry about who's not there.
Right.
That's the way sport works. That's the way this business works. And for Miller and for the Canucks, hopefully things resolve themselves however they do, and that he's able to get back in the lineup as quickly as he can. I mean, that's it. I mean, I don't have any other information. If I did, I wouldn't say, but I don't.
No.
And the reason is it's personal. If it would have been something where the NHLPA was involved, there would have been a statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so there is not a statement. And so the answer is just watch the games, and you can't, it's not for you.
Yeah. And I think it was important. And look, the right people were informed to the point of the PA wasn't involved, that it wasn't substance related.
Sure.
The program isn't involved, all that. And I think that that's fair. And I think that JT would appreciate that, and his family would appreciate that, which takes me back to the reminder that, you know, these men are human. They have families. He's dealing with something. All right, everybody can move on. I think we'll get an update at some point today on Alex Ovechkin from the Washington Capitals. Now, they initially came out after what appears to be the apparent knee injury and said that he'd be week to week. I mean, again, I doubt, based on confidentiality, they're going to say, well, maybe they will. I don't know. If he's had a procedure, maybe they'll acknowledge the procedure. But I think we're going to get a bigger sense of what the timeline is. What does week to week mean? You know, is that 4 to 6 weeks? 6 to 8?
I'll give you an example what it means.
Okay.
Austin Matthews is out day to day. Right? It
now
means
he's missed
nothing.
7 games.
Yeah, right. Like it means nothing. It means week to week means it's not this week. It could be next week, but it also could be the week after. Yeah. Like it's obviously a knee injury. Yeah, but it means you don't have a time frame on it. But if it is if there was a surgical procedure, you'll get a more definitive timeline. If it's some kind of strain or sprain, that's where the gap in it is created. I do have a little experience in this knee crap.
You do, yeah.
And sometimes it responds really, really quite well, and other times it just doesn't.
Yeah.
And I got to say though, like I was just loving the buzz around that he started to get hot, and you're like, you know what? It's bringing an anticipation.
Sure.
To the game, to the Caps. I was watching I was flicking through the channels last night, and Ken Burns's baseball, whatever you call it, mammoth story was on. And I flipped past the part where Joe DiMaggio was in his 56 game hitting streak. And he said each day people would come in and pick up a paper and they'd just say, did he get one today? Like, did DiMaggio get a hit today? That's all they were interested in. And when the Caps play, I'm getting texts from like my producer at ESPN where like, he's like, oh, it would just say Ovie. And I'm like, oh, we got another one. Like the anticipation for that was really cool. Like I loved it. And so I hope he's okay to quickly to resume the chase. It was such a nothing play.
It seemed to be, you know, and you're just not used to seeing the big man go down like that.
No, I mean, like the way they bumped and the way they fell, and it always sucks when someone gets hurt. Hopefully he's all right, but man, was he on a heater. It was like vintage Ovie for a couple of weeks there.
Yeah, so good, and so good for the NHL, to your point. And look, people around TSN were going, hey, we got to start tracking here. Like, you know, what's the league going to do? Is Gretz going to follow him for the last 4 games or 5 games or whatever it is? And probably yes to all of the above, depending on.
I always wonder about the record holder. Like, what happens if that thing goes on for 3.5 weeks and he hits a dry spell? Like, you're lugging this superstar around from place to place to go out there and present a puck. But I guess it's going to be done.
All right, those are your headlines. Thank you to our good friends at Tim Hortons.
Holiday Smile Cookie is back November 18th to 24th. 100% of proceeds are donated to local charities, community groups, and Tim's camps. Buy a Holiday Smile Cookie to give back to your community.
Our interviews on Ray and Dregs are brought to us by Canadian Club Classic 18-year-old High Proof. Invite your senses, Ray, to an elevated Canadian whiskey experience with Canadian Club. And because there was so much news this week, we didn't even try for a guest. We didn't forget about a guest. It was just there was so much stuff going on. So it's not going to be a regular occurrence. We value our esteemed guests that join us.
I like the guests because it's less of us and more of them. I like that. So you're on it for next week, right?
But our analytics show more Ray is better. Nah, with all due respect to the guests, they want more opinion from Ray. They want Ray, I guess, cursing and doing all the things that.
Well, I think we teed up 5 pretty good ones today.
Not bad. I think it was pretty solid.
I think so. So every once in a while the league has a chaotic week, and that was one of them.
Really was. Just one thing piled on after another. Tuesday was just crazy. But again, not to belabor this, but isn't it traditional, right? You get to around the 20 game mark, or you get to closing in on the U.S. Thanksgiving, and poof, here we go. Chaos ensues. That's the way it is.
But it's a good point because the stress of the season really hits about now because you're 25% through the season. Mm-hmm. And you're like, uh-oh, like now what? Because you can't sit around and think, like, oh, gee, Nashville won 16 in a row last year or whatever. We could do that. That's historic stuff. And so if you're teetering, now's the time to do something. Can you imagine going into your office knowing that you have to do something, but there's nothing there?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing available. I had a GM tell me once they adjourned a meeting. There was 4 of them in their office staring at a whiteboard, and it had all their players and all their depth chart of the organization. And one of the guys said, if we keep staring at these names, do you think they'll get better? and they went, no, time to go home. You're stuck. And so I think there's a few teams feeling that right now.
Awesome. All right. Next week, we'll have another edition of Ask Ray and Dregs Anything. You can send us your questions to us on X and Instagram at Ray and Dregs, or on the website, rayanddregs.com. And as always, every week, Ask Ray and Dregs brought to you by Acon. So Chicago for you today on this Thursday, and then back home for a few days to reset.
I'm back home for 10 days. We got a nice break, which is really great. We're, so I'll get to really settle into home, which is kind of a rarity. I always feel like I'm coming and going during the season. So it'll be interesting tonight, though, as I just look out the window, that frickin' snow is getting worse.
Oh, no. What time's your flight Friday
tomorrow,
morning?
6:14 a.m.
Oh.
So the plane will be here. The reason I take that first flight is the plane's here, and they want to shoo people out of here as quick as they can. But that is not what I was intending. However, the game tonight, Florida's in here. They've all of a sudden lost 3 out of 4. Mm-hmm. Twice against Jersey, twice against the Jets. They only won 1 of them. And so I would suspect Chicago's going to get an Owly Panther team. And we'll see how. I mean, Chicago's really they're in one right now. So we'll see how tonight goes.
All right, we'll wrap up a post game. So you race back to the hotel, maybe a little splash.
No, you know what, Dregs, until December 20th.
Yeah,
I which is exactly a month. Nothing till then.
Oh, good for you.
Nothing. So I need the problem is it's the Christmas cookies and baking shit that I can't stay away from. So I figure I got to decide one thing or the other. So I can last without having a couple of sifters till then. But the chocolate I'm going to need to save room for.
Sand, booze, and cold showers.
As my good buddy Dan Murphy says, you got to decide: are you going to eat or drink your calories? You can't do both.
You can't do both. I remind myself and my buddies of this on a weekend basis. So, all right, buddy. Have a great night.
So have a good one yourself, and hope you don't get the snowblower out. Everybody, thanks for listening. We'll check in next week.
You bet. Thank you to our sponsors who continue to support the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast and make this pod possible. Our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey, Tim Hortons, and thank you to Acon. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe.